All right. So let's kind of give an idea here. You're okay, baby. I'm gonna tilt it down just a little bit so we can see her. So she's starting to come out of it, and she's starting. You see that the smiley pant? That is her relieving stress. It's not. It doesn't mean it's gone yet. It just means it's on the way down.
Mm-hmm.
And so because you can see that she's still not submitted to the situation so much. And what we want to do is we just want to get her past the panic to where she can start relaxing.
Right.
You're right, man. I'm gonna go ahead and get her a little bit closer. Sit down. Good girl. So you notice how I kind of pulled her to where I wanted her, and then I held it in the same position. I didn't like drag her all the way. I let her loosen up the leash a little bit.
Yeah.
And so that's if you gotta move a dog that is anxious like this, you don't want to just keep pulling. You want to get them to a point and say I've asked you to be here, and then give them the opportunity to calm themselves down inside of that space, right? And that's just a technique, and it's not really important that you know, but it is definitely something that makes a difference. You're all right. Good girl. Good. Settle down. That's a good girl. Some of the things that I do for you guys are not always like this whole idea of putting my hand here and while she's in this panicky state and holding it is not necessarily something that I want you to do, and I'm just speaking that it has a little bit of danger to it, but I'm just, if something were to go wrong, I can handle that. But it gives her the clearest of choice of like what to do with it. It kind of forces her to make a choice on like, how am I going to handle this? And so she's still avoiding. She won't look over, and she won't look over. Good girl. Good girl. There you go. That's a good girl. All right. All right. That's a good mush face. And we want to get to the point to where she realizes this is not a bad thing. The only part about it that's bad is me trying to run away. Is her trying to run away. That's the only part about it that makes it bad.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay.
And so we're dispelling a myth. Right? It's her pulling against the leash is the bad part. And she's unfamiliar with the leash pressure. So we want to get her more familiar with that. And so we want to use that more often than is necessary. We want it to become sort of the standard, because so that she can be led and controlled. Because right now she is leading everything around, and more importantly, her anxiety is leading everything around.
Yes.
You know, her anxiety is the one that's making the decisions about where we go and where we don't go, and that's one of the biggest and most important things with the dog is whoever is the security is the one that we obey, right? Whoever is making everyone safe is the one that we obey, because we're going to think about it like a pack of wild dogs, and it's not dissimilar to that as much as people want to think. A lot of people want to think that, oh, they're domesticated now, but their brain systems are still set up for that work, right? And especially whenever you have a breed that's bred to be a little bit more anxious, because anxiety absolutely helps you perform. It helps you fight. It helps you protect. It helps you run. It helps you do all sorts of things. It helps me sing on Sundays. You know, the little bit of anxiety really helps a little bit whenever I go perform at church. You know, it's not a bad thing. Now you can choose to let it control you, or you can choose to harness it and use it. And that's what we want to teach her to do. Is we want to teach her to not be controlled by the anxiety, but eventually we teach her to let it help her do things like, you know, like play. You know, a little bit of anxiety helps you play. You see how different she reacted when I got my hand above
yeah.
her eyes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm going to put this right here so she can't move, and I'm just going to scoot closer. And then eventually she gets the opportunity where she just kind of has to be in my space.
Yeah.
And she has to put up with me.
Mm-hmm.
Now she has options. I mean, like she could try to fight me, and that's one of the five responses to anxiety is fight. And this is a fighting dog, so don't think that it's impossible. But I'm just like, I'm not seeing those signs. I'm seeing she just wants to avoid.
Okay.
You see the tension? But that tension can't stay forever, right? She gets tense, and then she realizes she can't continue to think that this petting is the worst thing in the world. You know, that it's such a threat. Whenever it doesn't continue to hurt her, then she's going to realize that it's going to dispel the myth that this weird guy petting me and getting all up in my space and controlling my motions and everything like that is not necessarily the worst of situations. Like, and it's not as threatening as I thought it was in the first place. And so, but now if we always give her the opportunity to choose whether to participate or not, she'll never learn it.
Yeah, she'll revert back to the what was easiest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good girl. That's a good girl. So she's not calm yet, but she's getting there. Right? But that's what we need, is we need to break through the wall of fear. And we need to let the wall kind of crumble a little bit, because it won't hold itself up forever.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And now, if we let her keep putting bricks on there, it will. So, do you feel like this situation and the work that we're doing is making your wife anxious?
She's she doesn't like to see Daisy upset or anything.
Right. Well,
but then again, she can't really handle Daisy.
Right.
Because our other dog saw a squirrel, lunged at it, and she broke a rotator cuff.
Yeah, that's a bad one too.
Yeah, so she's still recovering from that. So she can't really.
Right.
I'm the one that usually.
When we get to the point that we can get the collar on her. Do understand that we're probably going to get a little bit more of the panic for a second, and then she's going to learn that not only, like, so right now when she's at the end of the leash, it bothers her, but only a little bit. Right? It doesn't really bother her near as much as I bother her, right? And so that gives her the ability to choose to be at the end of the leash as long as she's been. This other piece of equipment, the idea is we kind of up the ante a little bit, which shortens the duration, right? So she'll say, "Oh, this is definitely not what I want," and so I have to make a different choice. Now it'll stress her out. Don't feel like any of this is a stress-free type of situation, because we grow through stress. Everything that we do that makes us grow is you don't ever grow because things worked out well. You grow because it worked out poorly and you overcame it, right? That's a good girl. That's a good. No, we're not running away. But she's firmly in it, but she's not so far gone. So be encouraged by that. She's got one answer to life right now, and so she just does that with all of her intensity. And so, but it hasn't become so intense yet, because she's like the fact that I can just reach her and pet her on top of the head. Again, this is harder for her to tolerate than me petting her underneath the mouth, and so the fact that she's letting me do that now is, and not even pulling against the leash, is a good thing. And so there are trainers out there that will talk about this as like submitting the dog, and I understand what they're saying, and that is not untrue to a degree, but that's not the purpose. The purpose is that I'm just taking control so that I can show her that her anxiety is not in control, and she doesn't need to follow that entirely. It is a good girl. It's a good girl. You're so sweet. you know. And if I can be strong and soft to her, then, you know, like there's a difference between being strong-handed with her and just smashing her down,
Right.
as opposed to being emotionally stable and strong with her to the point where now she says, okay, well, he's not a problem, and he's also not subject to my anxiety, because a lot of times she gets anxious and it makes everybody else anxious.
Yeah.
The dominant animal, in the truest sense of dominance, is the one who decides what energy they want to bring, what emotions they want to bring to a situation, and nobody can change them. Right? So the steadiness ends up being the dominant quality. If everybody comes in and freaks out, then, you know, so let's say that you were at a company party, right? And there's 3 stories worth of people all hanging out and hooting and hollering and catching up and having a good time. And then and they're, you know, it's getting rowdy. And then the CEO comes in and stands calmly, patiently in the center of the room. What's going to happen? What's going to happen is that everybody is going to kind of gravitate towards his or her behavior. And we know that, we can see it in our mind's eye, that that's the way it would turn out. And that's because that CEO in that situation is the dominant character. Very likely, anyway. By virtue of the fact that more people's life is hanging on what it is that they decide. They have the resources, they have the capabilities, they have the experience, they have all of these different things. You will find that people, even human beings, will tend to gravitate towards the energy of whoever the dominant character is.
Right.
So we get the opportunity to be that because we can know this script and this truth in our head. The dog doesn't necessarily know it yet. You know, eventually as they grow, you know, and they experience more, they can learn that, and they can start applying it to other dogs. Some of these little dogs understand it. They're like, no, I can be calm, and it will encourage others to be calm, right? And so that's the kind of thing that we're really working towards. Whenever it comes with her, is we want to take away her options to those 4 bad answers to anxiety, and we want to use our steadiness and presence and the proper tools to be able to block that and cause her to have to choose a different answer, which right now, to a degree, she's submitting to the situation. You know, not completely, but way more than when we started. Right?
Yes, definitely.
Way more than when we started. The idea that when we started, if I'd have reached and grabbed her head like this and everything, I could have pushed her to the point to where she did try to bite. You know, if I would have been careless or even purposefully trying to demonstrate, I could have gotten her to try to bite at me. You know, and there are trainers out there that will do the wrong thing so that they can escalate the situation and charge you more money. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that because my goal is for her. Like, honestly, I like you guys. My goal is to train people to be the best owners so that the dog doesn't have to live in the pain that is anxiety. And to a dog's mind, they are the same thing. Pain and anxiety are absolutely 100% indistinguishable in a dog's mind. They just don't have the capacity to know the difference. So when she starts to calm down, it's like it's a healing, essentially. And so now we go through a little bit of intense situation so that we can get to a point where we can start to let that thing dissipate, and then it will decrease the amount that it wants to come along in the future. Right? Now, that'll take some consistency on your part because I'm not going to live with you, you know, but what we want to do is we want to get started with that. And I want to show you guys how to do it.
All right.
I'm going to show you guys how to do it and how to kind of get started, and we'll kind of break through the worst of it while I'm here.
Okay.
And then again, as much as you guys want to continue with this, we can definitely do it. But I'm going to give you everything that you need in order to wrestle through it yourself. You know, so.
Yeah, like last night, that the leash would have been ideal.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, she would have tried to get away from me
Mhm.
at that point. Sure.
Yeah. Got too much going on in her brain.
Right.
And now we think about the running away and the avoidance thing. And what that does is it allows the anxiety to stay as high as possible and gives her just enough break to refuel and come at and become even more anxious.
Uh-huh.
Whereas this kind of overamps the brain.
Mhm.
Remind me again what you did for a living.
Oh, I was a police officer.
Oh, okay. Well, there's a ton of different references there. My pastor's a police officer, and I thought about it for a period of time. So,
yeah, I spent most of my years as a detective. So.
right. I'm trying to think of where the connection is there, because I mean, there's tons of things that correlate between dog training and police work. Police officers make really great dog trainers, very often.
She's come on.
It's so yeah. Let's say you were doing some detective work, and say you were investigating some sort of a criminal organization, and you just came in, and you came in and minorly busted the smallest amount as you could, and then you backed off, and then you came in and just did the tiniest amount and then backed off and tiniest amount. What happens is they learn a lot. They learn how to avoid, and then they grow in strength and intensity. Right. So. Not the best analogy I've ever used, but that is very similar to the idea, because we want to think about that anxiety as a character.
Yeah.
And the character has its own will, right? And what we want to do is we want to be more impressive than this other character that is trying to rule our dog, right? When
yeah, she settled down this morning when I swatted her and I said stop.
Right.
That did
Well,
it.
yeah, and so what that means is
I
that you caused a sharp enough bit of anxiety tied to a very specific time, moment, detail, whatever it happens to be, whatever it was attached to. So it makes her say that particular thing makes things get real bad, real sharply. And we want to think about that sharpness as a tool. So when we have a dog that is in anxiety, a lot of times we actually, one of the tools is actually to cause them more anxiety in a very sharp but acute, a very small period of time. And so correcting anxiety is one of those things that people don't like hearing, but it absolutely produces the results. And when we talk about the results, we're talking about how good it ends up being for them in the medium term, even not in kind of the short term, but it's longer than the moment. So, I'm going to see if I can get her to join us.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. That's good.
Yeah, well, it's fine. I'll go with it because I want to encourage her and let her know that we're not. Come on. Okay. Not you. Okay. Are you going to have the opportunity to join us? Yeah. Okay. All right. So as we continue, we get moving, and I just start moving with her. She doesn't want. That's fine. We can live with this for a second. She doesn't like the stick, and part of the reason she doesn't like the stick is because it has come to move her. So if I bring it over here, she's avoidant to it, everything, and that's fine. And we can wait on that. We honestly probably should. But here, actually, why don't you hold it?
Okay.
That way, if she is anxious about the stick, she can learn. It'll keep her, if it has a negative effect to her, it's going to keep her away from you and keep her from using you as the crutch. Right. And
thanks. Stop.
Let me see if I can find this thing. So this is the one. This is what we're using, and it looks awful. I know, but what it is it's a I mean, this is a ticket, right? For intents and purposes, this is a little bit of a correction. But what it is it ensures that the ticket is of the proper, amount, right? So it serves as the judge. It makes the decision on how intense things need to be, and really it does that by making sure that she is in control of how much correction she gets. And it doesn't really hurt per se, but it is unnerving. They don't like it, and so we want to keep that in mind. But what it is it will add that proportionality to the situation, and that's what we really want to happen. Is we want it to be a proportional to how freaked out she's getting, because the freaking out, this thing right here, is not rational. Because I'm not actually here to hurt her. Like, I'm not actually here to cause her any problem. I'm here to make her life better. But she can't understand that yet. Right. And she can't understand that yet. And what it's going to do is it is going to keep her from doing the runaway portion of it. That's going to prevent her from learning. You stay out of school, you might not ever learn anything.
Right.
You stay out of business and you might not become a good business person. Right? So all I'm doing now is I'm trying to size it to make sure that we're where we need to be. Okay. And then we're going to put it on and let her wear it for a minute so she can get used to it. There you go. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. And then...
Snickers, Tilly, stop.
Get back. Get in here. Come on, Tilly.
I'm going to try to make sure...
Get in here. Get in here. Come on. Get in here.
that we're doing
Tilly.
anything.
Come on, Tilly.
Okay,
Get
baby.
in here. Come on.
It's okay, baby.
Oh,
Nothing's wrong. Nothing's wrong. There you go.
come on.
Okay.
Get in here. Come on, Tilly. No.
So what'll end up happening is I'm going to go through pretty much my whole spiel of our fundamentals as we're all together, and then it will give her time to let some of this anxiety dissipate. Okay. You want to come up? You can come up. Do you not jump?
Okay, she's got that leash on, so she won't jump off.
Let's see if I can pick you up a little bit better. There you go. All right. See, this dog's not afraid.
Yeah,
See, did you see the energy just change as soon as the dominant dog came around? Yeah. What?
Yeah.
She is security to her. She is the judge. She's the one that says, is the situation good or bad? Mm-hmm. Because she's stable, and she's calm, and she doesn't get worked up. Because if you come into a situation, like if you were to walk in as a detective into a situation, into a household, and all of a sudden one of the people got real panicky, you know things. Mm-hmm. you understand a little bit about what's going on. And forgive me for extrapolating on your job. I know that not all situations fit whatever's on the TV. I get that. Mm-hmm. But if you got one that is completely steady and secure and everything like that, you understand that person's in charge, right? And so you get to know. And the dogs do the same. And that is an animal part of our brain that exists continuously in humans. So I have a feeling that your wife doesn't really want to be.
She's chasing that other dog.
Is she?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm checking to see if I'm reading the situation right, and it seems like maybe she's a little uncomfortable with the process. Because I understand it's not always the prettiest thing, and especially whenever you're thinking on an emotional level, it's not always that wonderful to see your beloved babies getting all stressed out, so. And I get that. Now, the reason that I keep bringing it up, though, is because the chances that a person with that type of mentality and that type of sensitivity is feeding the problem, is pretty large. It's pretty large. Now, in regards to this collar, I do want to encourage you to definitely take it off at night.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with her wearing it more regularly, getting more used to it, because if this thing is causing her anxiety, and then all of a sudden it's on all day, every day, like I don't know how the academy is similar to basic training, but I went to basic training, and they desensitize us to so many different things, because they just end up being ubiquitous. They end up being just all the time.
Right.
And so whenever these things are in your face and they're something to contend with all the time, you can't stay anxious about them 24/7 all day long every day. Like your brain just won't keep up with that, and so you eventually calm down, and that's what we do with desensitizing.
There you are, Snow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had that harness on her during the day, and then I take it off at night.
Yeah, and
before
so
she went to bed.
I'm fine with you having the harness as a matter of being able to get quick control of her until you can get more accurate control of her.
Yeah.
And if it's a matter of, but we do want to stop the runaway.
Right.
Because the runaway is just feeding her anxiety. Right. So we're getting acclimated, and it was a little bit of a task, and that's fine.
And she's sitting there, huh?
Yeah, well, I mean, I proved myself to not be a threat to her, and I slowly got her to the point to where she could tolerate me being being on the leash with me and me restricting her movement, and then being a little bit closer in proximity. Then I got down on the floor, and then I kind of moved my foot a little bit closer to her, and then I got her even closer, and then I kind of gave her a hand and let her get a sniff, and all of these different, it was a step-by-step, trying to get into her space, because she was very seriously not about that, and that's okay. That's okay, because like I was talking with Tom, the situation is that she is labeling things as enemies and dangers out of default. It's kind of a default thing, and her anxiety is taking such control of her that it is causing all these irrational actions. And so what we're doing with this, with me forcing her into an uncomfortable situation and then having her stay in an uncomfortable situation until it becomes comfortable, is we're dispelling myths. And that's what's going on. Her brain has got a whole lot of myths about what is the problem.
What causes that?
And first of all, sometimes it's just temperament and breeding.
Oh,
Because first of all, yeah, so this is the Shar-Peis are bred to be fighting guard dogs, right? And a guard dog that doesn't have any anxiety, like me, I sleep like the dead. Like I just sleep, and whenever I go to sleep, there are only a couple things that wake me up, and it's just not a problem for me. And I am also very, almost irrationally brave in a lot of situations, which makes me a good aggressive dog trainer.
Mm-hmm.
And that does not make me really apt to want to keep everybody out of my business, right? I'm like, come get in my business. Like, I don't care. I'm not afraid, right? And so it doesn't make for a good guard dog. And they bred Shar-Peis to be a certain thing. And so there is a certain amount of breeding temperamental difference that will be encouraged in that. Now understand that there's more difference inside of a litter than there is between breeds. You okay there? You okay there? There's more difference inside of a litter than there is between breeds. So not every Shar-Pei is going to be like this. But it is encouraged in the breed standard, right? So that's automatically, with her specifically, a little bit of what we're dealing with. And then, of course, whenever she gets feedback, and I become, I'm speaking as the dog, I become anxious, and it solves my anxiety. Like I run away, or I avoid, or I or I bite and fight, or I freeze until the thing goes away. Those things solve my anxiety. And now those are we're talking about the 5 anxiety responses, and that is fight, flight, which we've heard of those 2, everybody has, freeze, which is not just being still, it's petrified. She's a little bit in freeze right now, but not quite, because she's moving her head
I
around.
think she was that at the Ezra's
Rumor?
place. I think that's what she was doing then.
And then avoidance. And she does a lot of avoidance. And avoidance is generally the least problematic of these things. But what she does is she's self-soothing herself, right? And she's trying to fix her anxiety with avoidance, right? Which is going to work to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
She's going to avoid, and then it's going to make her feel a little less anxious, and then she'll come and get curious, and then she'll avoid, but the problem is it'll grow, and it'll grow, and it'll grow, and it'll grow until she becomes the chemical things that are happening when you get anxious, the part that makes you anxious, will continue to get stronger and stronger and stronger over time if we don't break the cycle. Now, there's a 5th answer to that, and that is submission. And it's not bowing, cowering, anything like that. It is just giving into the situation. Like acceptance is another really probably better word. I tend to use submission because we're talking about hierarchies and dominance and things of that nature, and submission fits on that. But acceptance is part of it, right? So as she has no other option but to stay in the situation, she's becoming more acceptant of it, and that is going to heal her anxiety. And we'll get to the point where her deciding acceptance in response to stress is going to fix her problem, because the stress is not real. Like, there's nothing actually going wrong here. Like, there's nothing wrong. The only thing that's wrong is the way that she's being anxious about it, right? And so learning this system is, first of all, good for the dogs, and it's also good for us, because we get anxious about things. And sometimes we go, okay, I'm just going to go along with it, and then it turns out fine, and we're like, okay, maybe I didn't need to be anxious, right? And then we learn, right? And that's what we want to continue to work towards. We want to try and get to the point where we block all the other responses. So in the process of doing that, we're going to allow, since there's a certain amount of time, see the laying down, she's getting comfortable because she knows she's going to be here, and she's accepting that. That's a good girl. That's a good girl. All right. You can also use patting, because whenever you get tense and frozen up, somebody pats you on the back and everything, and kind of jars loose, and it jars it loose physically, but also emotionally. And it's a real phenomenon. And so patting is a perfectly good thing to help them deal with this sort of petrified state, if they get to that point. So we're going to talk about communicating with dogs, and we're going to go through our regular spiel, and in the process you'll have time to kind of get out of this state, and then and also get used to the fact that she's got this collar on, right?
Oh, she's got that.
Yeah, I went ahead and put it on her. And that went just fine. It wasn't a big deal, because I already had control, and what she really, really wants is to be able to run away, to be able to avoid, and she can't avoid now, so she's not a biter. Like, I can tell that she's not. I mean, like, I've done enough to where if she was going to show me any signs that she wants to bite me, then she would have shown them, and there hasn't really been any.
Yeah.
Not to any degree that we need to worry about. So when we're talking with dogs, we have 3 main principles for communicating with dogs that we need to understand fully, and we need to dispel myths about, so that we can know what it is that we're actually saying, right? And how do we say things? Is we say things by motivation, and motivation is our first principle. We motivate positively and negatively. We're still motivating, because if I know that your husband is out there doing his job, then I am motivated to not commit crimes, right? Like that's part of it, and there can be that negative motivation of like, hey, I don't want to get a ticket, so I don't speed, that sort of thing. But so we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We want to motivate positively to talk about what it is that we want to give. We want the dog to give themselves permission to do, and to do with more frequency. And then we want to discourage by saying these are the things that we don't want you to do, and they also cause you they cause you less than optimal results. And so if a lot of times whenever we have this anxiety, we will give the dog what they want to try and let the anxiety go away. And so the dog says, I want to not be anxious. And so I will bark at somebody or growl at somebody, and then we leave. And then they're like, okay, that worked. Because now they're not here. They're not making me anxious anymore. I growled, and then they went away, and it fixed my problem, right? And so we have to be just as careful not to affirm the things that they're trying to do. And whenever we're dealing with anxiety, that's going to be the biggest thing, is she's going to try some things, and then we either get the opportunity to say, yeah, that works, or no, it doesn't work. This is good. She handled that just fine. Good girl. So when there's lots of different ways to motivate positively and negatively. I think we talked a little bit during the evaluation about the difference between food and physical affection, right? Just to review that, food rewards action, right? Because of the way that the brain is built to keep yourself alive, you have to do certain actions to hunt. Hunting is an action. It's not a state of mind. It's not, I mean, I'm sure you could get real poetic about it, but it's not. You know, it is a bunch of things, you know, and if you're trying to figure out who did what and everything, there are some channels that you go down routinely, and if a channel continues to pay out and you end up solving the situation and everything, you're going to do that more and more often, right? But we use the dopamine that comes from food in order to reward that, and that's very fast acting. It speaks about a very specific thing, you know, what just happened. And so we can use that to help them do actions. Now, what's going to be most important to her is the opposite end, which is the physical affection. So when she gets to the point where she starts getting less anxious, we want to be able to give physical affection to that, and especially you guys being able to do that, because she's less anxious about you, right? But that causes oxytocin in the brain, and oxytocin is more of a very slow, subdued background chemical, but it kind of helps everything. It's one of the most powerful anti-anxieties, anti-depression, anti-addiction chemicals that we have in our body. It's one of the greatest fixes. Whenever you go through the 12-step program, they talk about the 12th step is about making sure you're going and reinvesting in the community. And that is another thing that causes oxytocin, and that is one of the, when you get to that 12th step and you start reacting into the community, reinvesting into it, then you will actually stay clean, right? Because of what happens inside of the brain. And so what we want to do, well, we can manipulate that through physical affection. Now, there's a certain degree right now where I'm touching her, and it is not necessarily that positive. So we got to talk about what causes oxytocin and what doesn't. And what causes oxytocin is the non-offensive touch, right? So in efforts of desensitizing her, I'm going to touch her more and more and more and more, and it is causing her a certain amount of stress, but that stress can't continue forever, right? The brain doesn't have enough energy in order to stay stressed for that long. Your brain burns unbelievable amounts of calories. Like a professional chess player, they'll go and they'll take heart rhythms and everything on people in the middle of professional, like, top level chess tournaments, and these people's heart rates are beating at 185 beats per minute, sitting completely perfectly still. They're burning through, they'll burn through 10 or 12,000 calories that day.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, because of what the brain is doing. You know, it's a massively powerful thing. But so you'll just run out of energy. Like, you just don't have that much sugar in your system, right? And so what we want to do is we want to let that dissipate. And in the process, she's going to eventually no longer be able to produce so much anxiety, and this can become less offensive, and then we can actually use it as a reward. You guys can use it as a reward already, because you don't make her anxious. Like, not, at least not to the degree. But the physical affection addresses your state of mind. That's your state of being. State of being is the most accurate term. State of mind is the easiest one to understand, right? The easiest one to use. So whenever her anxiety starts to drop, I'm going to pet her and help that anxiety get the rest of the way down. But that being said, petting anxiety as a rule is not the right answer, because we want to think about the trajectory of the energy. If the energy is escalating, then, and we pet that, we are encouraging an escalating anxiety. We're encouraging the anxiety to go up. If we pet the anxiety as it's going down, which it is currently going down, the panting is a signal of that. Panting is a sign of anxiety, but it's a sign of the dog trying their best to get rid of the stress. And so I can pet and help that get all the rest of the way down. And then eventually, by the time we're done with this, by the time we're done talking, she should have relaxed probably to what she's going to get for the day. Because it's not gonna be 100% right off the bat. This is not a one-time cure or anything.
Right.
But you guys learning these things and applying them as we go forward will fix the problem. And you can take the most anxious dog in 1,000 and make it one of the most secure dogs in 1,000. Not simply, but mostly by choosing when to touch. Right? So if she's freaking out, that's not the time to touch her. In fact, it was not the time to touch her in a way that doesn't offend her.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the hard part is, and this is what takes a lot of fortitude on your part, is that whenever they are escalating their anxiety, we correct that. Is if all of a sudden I just started freaking out, why are you petting that dog? Why are you petting that dog? Why are you petting that dog? It would have an effect on you. Because you're like, wait a minute, what's wrong and everything. But if you know that petting this dog is a perfectly reasonable thing to do and everything, you're just going to say, you're acting like a fool right now. Stop it. You're getting freaked out about something that doesn't matter. Right? And like my daughter has gotten to a point where she's a little bit gun shy with certain dogs. And so our dog, who is just trained to the hilt, is absolutely perfectly stable and basically ignores her all day long. If he gets anywhere close to her and she starts yelling, "No, doggy, no," and everything, and I have to tell her, it's like, stop. Like, nothing is wrong. Your anxiety, but you're getting freaked out about this is not actually rational. We're not operating in truth. Let the dog be. He's just fine. And luckily he's so stable. He doesn't.
What kind of dog is it?
He's a blue heeler mix.
Okay, so
Yeah,
it's
so
a bigger
real
dog.
high anxiety breed. Very, very stable. And that's because we apply these things. He's the one that went to dog training school with me, and he's getting old now, but it's been a lot of years. That was 2015, so been doing this a while, right? So we want to motivate both positively and negatively, and we want to use so that was the positive parts. The negative parts is mostly we're going to talk about leash corrections and leash pressure more so, and on top of that, I'm sorry, baby. You see, I completely bumped this dog. She didn't care. Like, it's perfectly fine, stable, right? So leash pressure is a good thing in terms of the fact that we get the opportunity to snap the mind out of whatever it is that it's doing, right? And that's where we want to think about it, is we're really just breaking a focus, right? It's not that we're trying to cause any sort of harm to the dog. Sometimes we have to get a little bit sharper with it in order to get through, in order to break through that wall, that fuzz, that blurry vision and lack of focus, lack of reality, that anxiety causes. But the point is not to hurt the dog. The point is to snap them out of it and get them to readdress us and start taking our stability and borrowing that, right? And then the other one that we're going to do will be postural. And postural is a principle of claiming. Anybody that's ever seen a dog guarding a bone or even an image of that understands the concept. This thing is mine, and you, whoever I'm looking at, is the one that I'm addressing, and you stay away from it, right? And that can be scaled up or down to more intense, more oppressive, to a very, very mild thing where it just says, hey, listen, I own this space, or I want you to move away from this thing and give it some space and respect, right? So, those are the deals, and I'm going to teach you guys how to do that a little bit more directly as we get to a more visual portion of this lesson. So, positives and negatives. If a dog gives themselves too much permission to do things, then we need to reduce the amount that they do by negative reinforcement. If a dog does, if a dog does not give themselves permission at all, then we encourage it with positive reinforcement. And so now with the anxiety issue, we're actually dealing with a bit of both of those, right? Because there is a degree where she doesn't give herself permission to be comfortable. She doesn't give herself permission to calm down. She doesn't give herself permission to interact. And so we're going to want to give some measure of encouragement, which is mostly going to be through the petting, but we can also use food too. But then there also is going to be a lot of actions that she's doing in response to the anxiety that we want to stop, right? And so we're just using the both of them together, and that's the thing. There is a whole school of positive-only training that is happening out there, and it's a myth, for starters. Like, it doesn't actually exist. There is no possibility to be only positive to a dog. Because the lack of a positive is a negative, right? It's just a matter of degree and what you apply it to. What they're doing is they're doing a correction-free type of training, and that doesn't produce much. And it's a great way to keep people paying money for a long period of time, because there's just not really much in the way of results. So we want to get away from the idea that the only thing I need to tell a dog is what I like that they're doing. Because when we realize that anxiety is the same thing as pain in the dog's brain, we start to sniff out what actually is the root of anxiety. And one of the roots of anxiety is just being unsure and not having any sort of information about life, right? Whenever you don't understand that the person coming in the door is not actually a problem, then you'll have extra anxiety. When you don't know how to deal with all these different things, you'll have more and more and more and more anxiety, and that is the same thing as pain. So by the lack of the training, you end up causing negatives for the dog anyway. So we just want to be honest. That's what it is. If they're doing something that is irrational, if they're doing something that is non-productive, if they're doing something that is offensive to us, that is not going to allow us to live our life in a reasonable way, and for us to continue to move it in a more positive direction, then we need to interrupt that and say that's the thing that we don't want. And we correct so that we can stay in the positive more often. And that's the idea. So, when it comes down to understanding motivation, is we want to motivate according to the individual dog. All dogs are not the same. The way that I would communicate to her and the way that I would communicate to her is not going to be the same, because they're not starting at the same point, right? They have different amounts of noise going on in their brain at any point in time, and she's got quite a bit of noise. So doing things instructionally inside of a calm area like this, inside of the living room, and it's mostly calm whenever I'm not present, that is going to be an easy thing. It's not going to require a whole lot of motivation. You know, you don't have to have a whole lot of intensity to it, but you do the same thing while you're out on a walk, you know, just like when the dog sees the squirrel and messes up your rotator cuff, you know, like that's a big deal, right? And so having a smaller amount of motivation, even negative motivation, to discourage the running after that squirrel is not going to suffice. It's not going to make it. We're not going to get it. We're not going to get through to the dog, because their drive to go get it is going to be higher than their drive to avoid a small correction.
Okay.
right? So we need to give ourselves permission to scale the intensity of our handling up to the level of what is going on currently, right? To make sure that we can break through the noise. Okay. And now that's a trick, right? That's why we use the proper equipment to give the put the authority in our hands, and the power is in our hands, and we choose to use it whenever it's appropriate. And a lot of times, especially with this one, you don't actually have to choose to use it, because if they start to rush towards the end of the leash and everything, the harder they hit the end of the leash, the more they dislike it. It doesn't really cause us a ton of problems because they will quit pulling on it almost immediately, in most circumstances and everything, and then they'll give to the pressure. And once we have an animal that gives to pressure and tries to avoid the end of the leash, then they start to move with us. Now we can start to go out and interact with life. We can also keep them from doing things like running and sprinting away and all of that sort of stuff. But you need to have enough ability to communicate to where you get through without wrecking yourself, right, and making it a dangerous situation for you. So, see, this we're getting somewhere, because she's now not even being held somewhere, and she's allowing me to touch her and all of that. So we're getting there. She got a bit of an anxious side. She's a good girl. So according to the individual dog, according to the escalation of the situation. So as far as individual dog, I kind of skipped ahead and accidentally went to the second point. Every dog likes something different. And did I tell you guys my anecdote about my own personal dog and how he likes the game Punch in the Face? So he's a blue heeler. They're cattle dogs, and his favorite game in the world is Punch in the Mouth. Right? Now, if I was a trainer that wandered around and said, "Oh, well, it's very rewarding for a dog to punch them in the mouth," then I would be an idiot, and I would be abusing dogs in to a large degree. So the point I'm making by that is that what we do is not about how we feel about it, because by and large, I think punching things in the mouth is the worst one of the worst negatives that you're ever going to do. But there's weird situations where my dog actually enjoys it, and it's a fun game for him. You know, I'm a soldier and I'm a rough and tumble guy. You know, and you work with, I'm sure, a bunch of cops that absolutely enjoy the rougher side of life, right? So we want to dress in whatever way, in the way that she finds positive and negative. It's not how I feel about it, it's how she feels about it. And if it's something that she dislikes, then we can use it to discourage. If it's something that she likes, we can use it to encourage. But some dogs don't really like petting. They don't really like you to pet them. And so if I try to use that as a reward with a dog that did not want me to touch it, and it makes it very anxious for me to touch it, then I might be giving mixed signals. So we just want to be accurate in what it is. She doesn't really particularly care for my petting that much, at least not 20 minutes ago. And she's getting closer to tolerating that to where it might become a positive at some point here shortly. But we're getting there, and so we're not rewarding her yet necessarily. We're just kind of desensitizing. So whatever it is that you guys decide to use, you know, like that stick, generally dogs want to avoid it because it's weird and it's foreign and they don't know what to do with it. And so if you put it in their vicinity, they'll give space to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't ever have to do anything with the stick aside from instruct. And the dogs generally obey pretty darn well. She gets panicky about it thus far because it's still too foreign and she's got a lot of anxiety. So belaboring the point, it needs to be specific to her, not how we feel about it. Because there are a lot of things that some people are like, oh no, doing this is bad. Mm-hmm. You got to get rid of those mindsets of like one thing is either named good or bad. It's just effective or it's not. It's positive to the dog or it's negative. Or it's neither. Right? So we do it according to the escalation of the situation. Come on. There you go. That's a good girl. That's a good girl. We do it according to the escalation of the situation so that we know the difference between whether or not we're sitting calmly in our living room or we're out on a walk or we're in the middle of a or there's a dog fight going on at the dog park. You know, like these are all different intensities, and so we want to adjust according to that. And if they are getting out of line, or if we're trying to distract them with a positive, it's like if I want them to disregard the squirrel, I need to have brisket. You know, like, and they're not gonna dip out on the excitement of chasing a squirrel, you know, and giving into their prey drive and things of that nature, unless I have something just unbelievably valuable. And now that's where the positive only trainers do have a tendency to make some progress, as they keep trying to offer something of greater value. The problem is when you, just like in the way whenever I do things that cause her anxiety and I do them continuously, they become less effective. She gets desensitized to them. Same thing with positives. If you eat brisket or pizza or whatever is your favorite food, breakfast snack, lunch snack, dinner snack, every single day, and somebody tries to offer it to you as a reward for doing something that you don't want to do, you're just like, nah, whatever, like, I don't care, I don't need any more pizza. Right? So that's the same thing, and that's where their programs fall apart after about 6 weeks, and then people generally just stop coming, but now you've got 6 weeks worth of money, and you get to walk away as a trainer, and I just don't like doing that. You know, I'd rather give you guys the truth that actually works. So, according to the dog, according to the intensity of the situation, and then according to what the situation is going to become. I don't care that dogs jump on me. I'm 6'4", 200 plus pounds. I love dogs. Dog jumping on me, get big scratches. I don't care. Like, it does not bother me a bit. However, my grandma's 93, and if my dog jumps on grandma thinking that jumping is okay, we lose grandma. Right? Pulling on a leash is really not that big of a deal. It's a way bigger deal than people make it, but it's not the end of the world. Not coming to me in the backyard whenever it's all completely enclosed is not that big a deal. But if the car's coming and I need my dog to come to me so that it doesn't get hit and everything, it becomes a very big deal. So we want to train we want to motivate according to what life is going to become. So if coming to me might be a matter of life and death at some point, then I want to be consistent with it to the degree that if I ask you to do it, you need to do it 100% of the time, always, and right away. Right? And that's the training element. Right? Because one day it might matter. But if I continue to teach them that it doesn't matter, yeah, right. So, trying to keep myself online with my spiels. I took a break whenever I went to college, and I did a 2-year degree, and I did not so much training, so I'm not as fresh as I usually am. But so mostly we wanted. Okay, so we talked about the equipment. The reason we use this piece is because, first of all, she's handling it just fine, and I'm happy about that. This thing is actually going to constrict around the circumference. So if I have a flat collar that has a start and a finish, it's one continuous loop, you know, at the buckle, and I pull on myself, all of the pressure is on the left side of my hand. You're right. But whenever you have something like this that constricts around the circumference, it tightens all the way around at the same point. So that takes a lot of the pressure off the trachea. And so whenever, at the beginning, when we put the leash on her and she was pulling against it, it was causing her to have a little bit of breathing issue, and she was having I think she coughed once or whatever. And that is why we don't want to use that type of method, right? And it was better than it would have been because I did a slip lead, but that was what was necessary in order to break through this wall of fear, right? And now, as we go forward, this right here is actually going to protect her neck. And they've done autopsies on dogs that have been trained exclusively on flat collars and exclusively on prong collars, properly sized ones. And whenever they were trained on prong collars, they have zero damage, like zero tracheal damage, whereas the flat collar dogs got scarring. There's tons of scarring inside of their throat. And that causes problems. They end up coughing and having breathing issues. And some dogs' tracheas collapse altogether. You know, if you do that with a pug, like, you can kill it. It's not a good idea, right? And I don't know where Shar-Peis rank on that. They're probably pretty sturdy in relation to most dogs. But we want to use the one that's actually going to cause the least amount of damage. Now, it matters to her. So, I mean, whenever I get up and start moving with her, and she starts to interact with this collar a little bit, she might have a little bit of a freak out trying to figure it out. And that's why I want to use it first, is because if the freak out happens and we go into full flight mode and I loosen up the pressure for her, then the freak out is what worked. And dogs always do things that work, and they don't do things that don't work. Like, that's the principle. And it sounds utterly stupid and simple, but dogs do things that work. They're survival creatures. And so if she does not want the pressure and she gator rolls and I go, oh shoot, and I loosen up the pressure, then that works, and she's going to continue to do it till the end of time. Until all of a sudden it stops working. So I'd rather the first time her figure it out with the least amount of freak out, and her to learn that calming down is what makes this pressure stop. Right? Just like she started with the leash over there, she learned to calm down to make the pressure stop. And then after that, she'll start giving to the pressure. And then this thing fixes a bunch of problems right away. You know, but if we treat it poorly and we lie to our dogs and saying, oh yeah, you doing a gator roll into my china cabinet is what causes the pressure to stop, then we'll start telling a lie. We're basically like lying to our dog. So the next thing, we get into the second principle, which is much shorter, and the third principle is also much shorter. The second one is timing. Dogs have 1.3 seconds to associate cause and effect. Why did this happen? Well, it happened because of what happened just before. And on average, 1.3 seconds, and that's it. So dogs are always living in the right now. We're not talking about what happened last week. We're not talking about what happened 30 seconds ago even. It's right now. So when they do something that we like, we reward them right away. When they do something that we don't like, we correct them right away. And now sometimes that's not possible, so what we do is we develop a marker system. The marker system, I use the words good, which is pretty easy. And that means that you're doing something that I want you to do, keep doing it. Continue to do it, right? And then I use the word nope, N-O-P-E, specifically because of what it does to the human brain whenever you say nope. Because it's very, very difficult to get very angry and serious whenever you say nope. Nope has an automatic connotation of matter of fact. It's like, nope, it's just the wrong answer. You know, like, I'm not mad at you. It's just nope. You know, like, we're just, that's not it. And so when we do those markers, what it can do is it can give us the ability to bridge the gap of time and to announce what it is that we're talking about in the moment that it's happening so the dog understands. And then we can take our time to reward, or we can give the dog time to stop the behavior before we actually correct and hopefully avoid the correction in total. You know, the dog ends up getting the ability to choose its own destiny of how much correction it wants, because if it changes the behavior and it stops feeding its anxiety or it stops breaking commands and all of those different things, then they have the ability to avoid the correction that is oncoming. But nope just announces, this is what I'm talking about. What you're doing currently is what I'm discussing, and I'm coming to prevent you from doing it. And if you prevent yourself, then it's not necessary for me to continue, right? And so we use those markers. But if we use no, then we start to break into a different sort of emotional correction, you know, through our energy and through our intensity and our anger, and we don't want to do that. There's not really anything good that comes out of getting angry with a dog. Almost zero. Two things happen is, number one, it tends to intensify it to a degree that it doesn't need to be with the dog. And number two, what it does is it announces how out of control we are. And what I want for her is I want her to feel like you guys are in complete and total control. And nothing is coming along that is going to stir you up, that you're rock solid. You're firm, you're sturdy, you're powerful, so that if anything comes to hurt her, you can handle it. And that's the kind of energy I want you guys to have, and that is the dominant energy. Is unaffectable. But if her behavior can get me all riled up, then that makes her the powerful animal. And then when she's the powerful animal, she has to do the defending. Dogs come pre-programmed with this information. It's not something that needs to be taught. If I'm the most powerful and something bad happens, I have to handle it. The end. You know, and that is what it is. So I want her to feel like that, like I am the most powerful, because then if something comes along that she deems as a threat, I will handle it. Now, the good part about that is if that thing comes around and she deems it as a threat and I do not get stirred up and I remain calm when she doesn't, that just makes me more dominant. And it also helps to inform her that this is not actually an issue. You know, when Jim the mailman comes to put mail in the average mailbox, the dog goes to the window and says, "Oh my gosh, there's somebody here!" And they bark and bark and bark and bark and bark and get all excited and everything and throw a fit. And then Jim leaves. And they go, "Oh, okay, that worked." Right? And so so now in the situation, we can be like, "Oh my gosh, what's the problem?" And we get all stirred up, or we start hollering at the dog or whatever. "Stop doing it, stop, 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 stop." And everything, we're just adding to that energy. And we're also proving ourselves to not be very sturdy. Now, the dog gets aggravated at the mailman, and I say, "Quit that," in a calm but affirmative way. Then the dog can be like, "Oh, like my parents didn't get anxious about that guy wandering around dropping bombs in my house, in my yard. They got aggravated with me for being out of line, for being irrational." Mm-hmm. Right? And so, let's see, you're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay. So, it's all about the timing, and it's all about how we present ourselves. Because you notice that there are some people that they show up and dogs just want to mind them right off the bat.
They want what?
They want to mind them. They want to pay attention to them and follow their lead. And it's a very natural thing. And it's generally very, very sturdy, unreactive people, right? And that's what I want to kind of train you to be. Is if you're feeling anxious and panicky about something, fake it. You know, keep it to yourself for your dog's sake. Because, I mean, it's just like being a kid and all of a sudden your parent starts getting crazy anxious. My mom was a single mom for a period of time, and every once in a while everything was just fine, and then it just wasn't all of a sudden. And she's in a tizzy and she's freaking out about something and everything, and that just made us super anxious. We felt out of control, and sometimes it meant we ended up moving 3 states away in the middle of the night, you know, because things legitimately went wrong. And that's not a great thing for the receiver, right? And so, but my dad had passed away when I was very young, but all my memories of him is he was a firm guy for sure, and he was a gigantic, intimidating man, but I slept like a baby, because first of all, he was very stable. We stayed in the same house all that I remember him just about, and there wasn't nobody coming in and bothering us. There wasn't anybody, you know, and I followed his rules, but other than that, as long as I followed his rules, I was as safe and sound as possible, because he was very steady, unemotional, you know, very solid, and also powerful, right? And so we want to project that to our dogs to give them the ability to have the most security possible. And most of that is not about a physical nature. It is about the way that the energy that we bring to the situation. This dog right here, when she got up here, she got way calmer. And this is a Chihuahua, right? It doesn't take anything aside from the will to be steady. And as we get more desensitized in the situation, we start having things work out for us because we became calm. It's going to do the same thing as whenever it works out for her because she becomes calm. And then that's going to amplify, and it's going to turn into this positive feedback loop that makes this a very peaceful house, right? These other little dogs coming around pretty darn stable dogs, right? And aside from the fact that she's pretty dominant in the fact that her energy, she doesn't allow their calm to overcome her anxiety, you know, that's where the leash comes in. We hijack that process and we say, this is the end of this, and you'll learn to be calm, and you'll be happy about it. You just don't know yet because you haven't been through it, you know, but I know because I've been through it thousands of times, you know, and it works every time people apply it, you know. And sometimes I'll have clients that don't apply it, and like I went and saw a dog that I trained 5 or 6 years ago, worked with his owner 10 or 12 times, and she has just got some emotional issues that she hasn't worked through, and so she gets real pinched up all the time. And the dog is still pretty darn good, but he's not quite where he should be, you know, because she's still got some things she needs to work through in her own spiritual life, you know what I mean, in her own personal inner brain. So the last principle is consistency. The more consistent we give information, the more consistently things work out, the quicker dogs fall in line with them. And they submit to it. Look, if every time I came in here, we went through this process, the next time it'll take less time, the time after that will take even less time until she gets to a state right here, which is pretty darn good. Like she's finally getting out of it altogether. She's not really even reacting to my touch at all anymore because she's like, there's no need for that. But that'll go away, and then I come back, and then she'll get a little bit more tense up. And so that's the kind of thing that I want you guys to be able to escort her through. And that doesn't mean that every person that comes in here needs to hold the dog, you know, and touch it. But we need to interrupt all of those panicky anxiety things that cause her to run away and do avoidance. So whenever I give you guys your little cheat sheet, it's going to have these 5 anxiety responses, and I want to tell you which ones to block and which ones to allow to happen, which one we're aiming for, which this is what we're aiming for, submissive or acceptance, however that ends up being. And so we'll get through it, but we want to force it through. And that's the part that people don't necessarily like. I do not want to give her the option to self-soothe, right?
Okay.
Like even in this situation between you guys, you have a different stance and you have a different stance. His stance is wider, open, you know, like comfortable, authoritative, and everything, and you're petting yourself, right? You feel anxious about this. I can tell, and this is not your favorite idea in total, and that's accurate, isn't it? Right? Yeah. The fact that she is anxious helps you to be anxious.
Yeah.
Right? And that is going to be one of those things that we need to pay attention to and work on overcoming. Because whenever we get anxious, like we give signals and everything, and we touch ourselves, we touch our face a lot whenever we're anxious. And what that can do is that's a self-soothing thing. And so what we're doing is we're drugging ourselves a little bit. Right? And so when she fight, flight, freeze, avoidance, pacing, licking, that petting lick that some dogs will do, and everything, these are all self-soothing behaviors. And what they're doing is they're tricking the brain. So like the scale of anxiety over time is like it starts to go up a little bit, and then they do this behavior and it drops it about that much, and then it goes up and it drops and it goes up and it drops, and it keeps rebounding and it keeps escalating and escalating and escalating. And that's why when we interrupt with something even more sharply negative, we understand that every time something moves in one direction, it always moves the opposite direction afterwards. So if we correct anxiety, she'll have a real sharp thing, but then it'll drop very quickly down below what it was before. And so then it'll start to rise again, and we'll do another sharp, and we'll go down here. And now we're moving continuously in the direction of lower anxiety on a more permanent basis, right? And those are the kind of things that we want to think about. So whenever she does start getting a little bit more tense and she tries to get back to that idea of running away because it's always served her before, I'm going to put the pressure on the leash, and then she'll get back to the pressure, and then she'll go, okay, well, that didn't work, but I guess I'm fine. I am on the couch and it's comfortable, and he hasn't punched me or bit me or anything like that yet. You know, it's like, this is not going to be that bad and everything, and maybe I need to just give into it a little bit. And then we get that, and then the dog recovers. And that's going to be your biggest battle with her, is just learning to read this anxiety map and understanding and getting over our own feelings. And like, it feels really mean sometimes to see an anxious animal and then to correct them for being anxious. That seems mean, right? I get it. I don't actually enjoy it. I just see the long term of it and realize that it actually will break the cycle, break the chain of anxiety to the point where they end up being free of it entirely. Because they animals don't, like, we don't really get less anxious, we just become braver. And we stop letting anxiety control us, right? And
so that dog behavior, do people act the same way?
Absolutely. So when it comes down to your brain, a dog has one layer of brain and we have three, right? Yeah, see. Come on. Come on. Good girl. So, you see sharp regression in her calm, and it just worked out poorly. You know, it didn't work out. We got her right back up here. I didn't get stirred up about it. Everything, and she'll be like, oh, I feel kind of stupid. You know, because that didn't work out at all. Right? And then she'll take a minute and she'll get back to the calm that she was at before. You're all right. You're okay, sweetie. You're okay. You're just anxious. That's all right. We don't hate you for it. So, but anyway, the emotional decision-making portion of our brain, because most of our decisions are almost all emotional in the beginning, and we train ourselves as life goes forward to get out of that amygdala central brain portion, that very basic brain portion, and start using our higher order brain to run through logic and philosophy and things of that nature to determine what is actually good in the long haul.
Mm-hmm.
So that the fact that dogs live in the moment, they don't ever live in the long haul. It either just keeps working out and they become more solid in their choices of what works out, or they become less. You know, I mean, like, and that's just it. They just find new things that work, and they find out what doesn't work, and then they're just a survival program, essentially. And we have that, and it is a very emotional part of our brain, but we have two other layers that work better and that are more reliable in the long run, that allow us to build rocket ships and allow us to have human communication. So the idea that the human is still animal. We have all the same equipment as they do. They just don't have all the same equipment as we do. And so what we want to do is we want to teach them to reach into. We want to program that very programmable portion of the brain. You can do all these same things with humans. You can absolutely do to great or horrible effect. It's not, it's just a tool, right? Is you can train people to continuously react in more predictable, more like within the bounds of your desires. If you use these things. Yeah, she ain't bothered a bit.
I know.
She's a good dog. I like this little dog. If
If
all Chihuahuas were like you, I would love Chihuahuas.
You know what? People have said that to us.
Absolutely. She's
This is
solid as a
normal.
rock. Solid as a rock. And she probably didn't struggle with anxiety from the beginning. So there was never really any particular need for that pattern to go all haywire.
Right.
This one just started with anxiety. And the things that you guys do are great things in general for a very stable dog. And I think that your previous Sharpei probably was very stable and less anxious to start with. And so it didn't bother that dog. But whenever we have a dog that is anxious and we become very pitying to them, and we try to solve the problem for them in the moment, in the short term and everything, we create this, they call it a positive feedback loop, which means that it gets bad, which causes us to act in a way that makes it worse, and then it just keeps looping up, and it's like a hockey stick. It just escalates really fast. And so I'm glad you guys called when you called, because we're at a point that is completely manageable right now. If we dispel the myths and we start addressing them in truth, then we can get past that. So that's a lot of my spiel, and we'll continue to ask questions and answers and kind of come up with some different things and strategies for going forward that will allow us to actually do the real things in life, because this so far is just philosophy. What did you do?
What is it
What is
you
it?
want?
You have a soft coat too. You're so soft.
She wants to get down, but she's
Want to get down?
afraid to jump.
So, that being said,
curious
Huh?
as to,
Yes, ma'am.
is this because we have 3 layers in our brain?
Mhm.
Like animals, knowing human beings, you can have somebody who's pretty level, and then you have these people that are dangerous.
Mhm.
Do they choose to be like that?
So in both situations, the people that are hyper stable and the people who are hyper dangerous generally are using more of the higher level brains. What they're doing is they're using the higher level brain to manipulate the lower level brain and get it under control.
Are they
So-
aware of this as it's...
Aware, they probably don't think about it in those terms, but yeah, they probably, like a psychopath probably gets aware that I got angry one time and it got me farther away from this thing that I'm the most motivated towards. Like if you had, I don't know, there TV shows out there, where the main character, I watched Dexter for a while, and he's a psychopath, but he's a serial killer, right? And he has the ability, he used his higher order brain thinking in order to get in control of his emotional brain and not cause it to put him at risk to where he could continue to do the awful thing that he was doing. And then the story is that he started doing it for the greater good, which I don't necessarily really, I don't think it's ever that, that easy to make murder a reasonable thing. So, but on both of those circumstances, whenever you have a monk who gets in control of their emotions so that they can love people, or a pastor or something like that, who subordinates their emotional brain to their higher thinking, they can do great things with it, or you can use that same thing, and it's whatever you decide. Because the higher order brain, you get to just decide what it is that you want to do,
So
And
with
so-
them having this, so a dog that is, I'd say, let's just say her,
Mhm.
A person could go to an extreme. Could a calm dog get to the point that it would be vicious?
Absolutely. We did what's called defensive work, which is like if you think of like a guard dog, like a junkyard guard dog.
Yeah.
Like they're like this right here. It's not going to make a great junkyard guard dog.
No.
But we have had dogs that we worked with that we wanted to teach to do defensive work, and basically that is the idea of acting aggressive in order to get things to go away, right? And in order to get that started, what you do have to do is you have to kind of destabilize the dog and cause them a pretty large amount of anxiety in the situation. Then they bark at you finally, and then you treat it like it's the worst thing in the world, and then you run away from it, right? And so what you're doing is you're taking and manipulating these very simple systems, trying to force them to have feedback. We ended up having an accident over here. Somebody did. What did you do that for?
You are. That just tinkled. You're
She's like-
bad.
Yeah. So, just in efforts of being a thorough dog trainer, the cute the cute corrections in English language that the dog doesn't understand is going to come across as encouragement. So it'll be one of those things. We want to be as clear, you know, because I mean, I heard a pastor say the other day. I think it was a pastor. No, it was Dave Ramsey. Said the other day, it's like unclear is unkind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I say that in those strong terms because just in the same way as Dave does, so that it can hit you in the emotional center and it can matter enough. But we want to be as clear as possible. So whenever things are not right, we want to we want to announce that they're clearly not right. Whenever they're right, we want to announce that they're clearly right. To the degree that it is, you know, because sometimes it's just barely right, and I don't want to throw a party for a dog for doing something that's just barely right, you know. But sometimes they do exactly the right thing, and it's groundbreaking and everything, and so we reward it with the same level of intensity that is necessary. So now, when it comes down to, so you guys have witnessed a little bit of the difference of what can happen whenever we block the fear responses. Because I'm a big negative here to her. Like, I'm a big cause of anxiety to her. I'm a big, strong person. I speak in a big voice. I take control of things whenever I come into a room. I have a dominant personality. And so it's a lot for her to deal with. Well, I came in and I got after, you know, and backed her up with the stick, and I pushed around the other dogs and everything. Mm-hmm. So, like, I'm a lot to deal with. But she has come, you know, especially you, Tom, have seen that she's come a long way in getting through an anxiety event by us taking away the fight, flight, fear, and avoidance.
Right.
Do you agree?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you feel like this escalated more so than a lot of the situations? Or is this pretty on par? Do you feel like getting to this level of acceptance of the situation is something that you get on the regular day to day? Like if somebody else had come in here,
if somebody else came in, she would just stay with me.
Right. Mm-hmm. Aside from seeking your security.
Yeah. Yeah, she would just basically stay with me.
Right.
Yeah,
for example, when we had the kids over for Easter,
mm-hmm.
she would just basically stay with me. Now, she would move around a little bit, but it would always be back to me. Then we went over to her, our daughter's on Mother's Day, and they had other dogs there. In the beginning, she's pretty much with me, and then she started meandering, yeah.
Right.
And she liked the freedom of the yard because it was fenced.
Right.
And
she liked playing with
the dogs.
Yeah. Well, and that's good. And she was probably finding other good dominant personalities that she could that made her feel secure.
Yeah, she wouldn't really get too close to anyone.
Right. So.
No, but she would come to you.
Right.
Or sit by you, or sometimes she'd run, if whoever was closest.
Right.
She might come by me. But she always goes back to him, always.
Right. And I can imagine that it is a matter of, like, I mean, and I said before, some of it has to do a lot of times with just testosterone, because she can smell how much testosterone somebody has. And that's another thing, is like, if I have come in here, I don't know where we sit, but if I have come in here with a whole bunch of testosterone, then that also makes me all the more threatening.
Oh, okay.
Because testosterone is not good or bad, it's just an amplifier. It just makes, whatever it is that you are, it makes you more of. And it generally makes you capable of physical things, especially if you need to summon a whole lot of intensity. you can do that. But if your goal in life is to be the most gentle person that you have, having more testosterone will make you more insulated towards the emotions that would keep you from being gentle, right? So it's really it's kind of a little bit of a numbing thing, but it makes a lot of whatever it happens to be. So if I find somebody to be a securing presence and they have a lot of testosterone, then it's easier for me to cling to that person, right?
Mm-hmm.
They make you feel more secure. And so that is not the only factor. It's just a factor. You know, the dogs do have a tendency to gravitate towards men a lot of times whenever they're feeling anxious. You know, if they want to feel secure and safe, then they're going to go to what is proven as far as their nose is concerned to be the source of most power, and then they're going to go and they're going to go sit right by your feet.
Do they? I guess an example is we've had other dogs and we've had another Shar-Pei, and
So done.
this dog is the
Okay.
same way. There's a man who lives right here. Maisie did not like him. And
Yeah.
all he had to do was get out of his truck, and she did not like it.
Right.
And she is doing the same thing.
Yeah.
She don't want to see him.
Right.
So, are they picking that up from that individual?
Very likely, and it probably could be something as innocuous as the way that they move, because a lot of times you'll have dogs that'll go just absolutely nuts with somebody with like a walker or a limp or something like that, because there is what is considered in the animal kingdom a forthright, upright position, you know, and we agree with that as human beings. We just don't think about it in those terms as often. But whenever you see somebody who has this kind of posture, it's not very easy to trust, right?
And Snow does the same thing.
Right.
It's like,
Yeah.
what?
So now the person might not actually be a bad person, but
He's a tough guy. He's a tough guy.
Well, and a lot of times tough guys become tough guys because they feel out of control and they feel like they need to force situations because they're anxious. Right? They're anxious and sometimes they're weaselly and everything like that. Because that's where we talk about the difference in dominance. Dominance is not the one who is the most aggressive in a situation, the one who is the most pushy. Dominance is the one who's the most secure. Right? As the person who cannot be manipulated. The Bible talks about the upright man.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And someone of noble character, someone who is steady and firm and steadfast in their character, in the teachings of God. And whenever you are leaning on the Almighty,
right,
and you know that He has already won, He lives outside of time, and He's already seen the end, and it's over with, and He's informed us of this, everything, then it gives us, as you know, as believing people, the ability to not have really any anxiety about things if we choose, because if we really want to rationalize and use our higher level brain to think about it, is like a being that cannot lie, who has all of the power in the world, is promised to provide for me in no uncertain terms. Then why would I worry about the lilies of the field? Do not worry about that, right? And that's the kind of thing, and that gives us the ability to be kind of almost like superheroes as Christians. If we actually use our higher order brain to believe rationally the things that are in the Bible and everything, it really does make us absolutely formidable and able to stand in front of the greatest judges in the world and be able to live through prison sentences and still do good things like Paul did and all of that stuff. And so, I'm trying to think of where I got on this tangent. I like where I was going, but
well, I was
the original question.
When I was mentioning that, it's because
The upright
right.
was where I was at, and so we can tell whenever somebody comes in and they stand in this posture. This is an animal thing. Well, you stand upright, and whenever you expose your innards to the world, and that says that I feel so secure in myself that I'm willing to make myself vulnerable in all of my squishy parts, right? And this, even though that this is a commanding, powerful position in our minds as psychology, the real reason for that is because we have put ourselves as vulnerable as we can be. The quickest and easy way for almost all of history to dispatch of a person and everything is poke them in the squishy parts, right? With something sharp, right? And that's it. And so, or you can even punch, like you can punch somebody to death in the stomach if you were strong enough. So when you stand upright and open like that, not like this, then you are exposing to the world that I'm like that. Now, whenever people start to do the other, whenever they start to curl and protect and everything like that, that says that I'm not feeling very secure about things. And and all animals know that it's the anxious animal that hurts you. That's normal. That's normal in the animal mind. And we really know it too, because we look at people and we're like, that guy seems weaselly, and I don't know why. Right?
It's your perception.
So they're picking up on body language, and that is one of those things that we want to keep in mind with our body language. Is like we want to project that confidence regularly. That's why whenever you watch the dog handlers on the thing, they're always standing perfectly upright and everything. And that because if I have to be small and weak and lower my head and protect myself from the gaze of the audience and all of that stuff, then it inspires no confidence to the dog, and then the dog doesn't want to follow you. Dogs follow strength. They follow strength, whether that be strength of will, strength of mind, strength of emotions and everything. And that's where we get through these things by recognizing that her anxiety is not her. It's what's oppressing her. And so I can view that anxiety as the enemy as opposed to as my dog. Because when that anxiety is my dog, it makes it very difficult for me to break her out of that cycle. When that anxiety is the thing that's oppressing my dog, it's no problem at all for me to go protect her from that. Right? And that's the way we want to, that's the emotional things that we want to convince ourselves. That's what we want to put through our higher order brain so that we can get our emotions in control so that we don't accidentally make the dog suffer more.
Right.
Right. And I belabor the point because it's a hard pill to swallow. It's not an easy thing to watch yourself on a regular basis and say, wait a minute, am I giving into my anxiety, which is making hers so powerful that it is oppressing her? And that's where a lot of people, where you can take the talk between like spiritual forces and psychology, and you can kind of tie them together without having to explain anything in miracles, is like there really are forces in your brain that are acting whether you want them to or not.
Right.
And whatever the source of that is, we don't have to talk about that. But I do definitely always want to encourage people to view the emotions as signals and personalities and things of that nature, as opposed to as part of yourself. I struggle with anxiety, and I've got to the point where I realize that my anxiety is just the thing that keeps me from acting. If I was super anxious and allowed that to continue, then I couldn't do my job, period. Because my anxiety would cause me to get bit, which would make my anxiety get higher. Right? But you saw, I even put the dog in a precarious position, and I got a little bit too quick, a little bit quickly into the place where I was making myself very vulnerable to her. And now we can get out of it. It's because I decided to choose trust. I decided to choose to not watch her like a hawk, as if I'm expecting her to fail. And I'm projecting the positive idea through my security in the situation. And that's where I can come over here and eventually I mess with her lips and everything. And that's exactly how Ezra gets through so many of these situations with these dogs that are difficult to handle. It's the same way my mom did. And I watched it happen for almost 30 years before I actually even went to dog training school. Right? And that's the true fix. The training is about a 15-minute conversation where I teach you how to teach an exercise. I literally have a video online where I sum it up.
I've seen Ezra handle some
Yeah.
some dogs that were,
Mhm.
and he was so he had a strong presence,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
and
He's not weak.
no,
He's-
no,
He's graceful.
yeah, he
And he
is.
has mercy, and he has stability, and he's not a reactive person.
No,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
and he handled what was it, a Rottweiler,
Mhm.
and like he went like this on the dog's face,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah.
And it changed the whole thing.
You can,
And that was a big dog.
yeah, you get them up underneath here
Yep.
because there's no way they can bite you at that point. That's
Right.
the same thing as like I've had situations where dog comes after me and everything, and if you learn to control this part right back behind the head, and there's zero chance of you getting bit. There's that video on my YouTube page that I'll get you guys to at one point, where this dog named Max, who's about 100-pound Bernese and German Shepherd mix, and he
Oh,
comes
boy.
hard at my neck, and it only ends up being about 5 or 6 seconds worth of struggle, but it ended up being 12 bite attempts inside of 3 seconds.
12?
And I handled it. And then the reason is because you get to know different places where you can be around the dog and be in their very close proximity and have control without putting yourself in jeopardy. And so if you have to take one of those little dogs and you have to cut very specific curves in their face hair, everything, you gotta learn how to hold that head still, and you gotta do it without getting yourself bit as well. And a good groomer learns how to do that. And that's where I learned all of my dog handling skills, is from the groomer, from my mom, who's one of the best that I've ever seen. You know, I've been around tons and tons of groomers. My mom's
And you know what? People
immaculate.
who take their animals to a place like that,
Mhm.
they don't want to go anyplace else because,
Right.
yeah.
And that's the thing, is when my mom starts grooming a dog, the dog gets more secure over time. But my mom's also not nonsense. Like, if you're acting stupid, I'm going to let you know you're acting stupid. I'm going to correct it. You know? But if you're not, then I'm going to, we're going to have a good time. And we're going to get calm. You know, and we're going to learn to tolerate these things, and we're going to find out the truth of the matter is this isn't going to kill you. Like, there's nothing to run away from.
It's like kids disciplining children, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, got little ones. So, we want to talk about concrete things. When people come around and the anxiety behaviors start to ramp up, I want this setup. I want you to be able to keep her close.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to be watching for the weaselly, hyper alert type of behaviors. And I want you to be able to pop the leash. If I see something like that where she's getting a little bit too stirred up about something, I want you to, and it's not a pull, it's snap and release, right? And that's one of those things that is perfectly fine to practice on no dog, you know, without it on the dog. And everything. That's why I hold it like this, is because I don't want to actually give her any information. And I will go, nope, nope, nope. And then we'll get yourself in the habit of using these proper markers. The idea of the word nope is I want it to mean stop what you're doing, check in with me. That's going to be the end result of every single piece. That's the simplest, most consistent thing. What you're doing is not what I like. Check back in with me to see how to behave. And then I'm going to be dominant from that point forward, and I'm going to project the kind of energy that I want my dog to have. Part of the reason why I'm slouching as I am and being as relaxed and casual as I am is because I want her to feel casual, right? And we're in the living room. There's nothing to defend against. I don't need to be up like this, and I certainly don't need to be doing that towards you guys, because that might send her the wrong signal. But so the idea is, she starts getting all, then, you know, it's nope, pop, and everything. And if that doesn't work, then do pull her to the point where she comes and addresses you, and then we're going to project the kind of behavior, the kind of energy that we want from her. And then whenever she starts to give it, then we pet that. And that's rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. You know, like the people who don't. Anyway, that's going to be a bad joke. Let's skip that. So the other thing is we want to talk about space. That in the animal kingdom, space is respect, right? And so if a dog treats your space as if it has value, then that is a respect thing. When she comes and sits by your feet, she is tipping her hat to you in some regard, in terms of like I'm resting on your strength. But what she is doing is she's using your strength. She's coming and using it at her will, at her leisure, as a tool. And you don't want your dog calling you a tool, right? that's not what we do, right? So we want to get to the understanding, because she respects my space a lot. She doesn't want to be in it at all. She's avoiding it at all costs because I'm weird. She doesn't understand me. I'm projecting some measure of in control and powerful and things of that nature, and she's like, I'm going to stay as far away from that guy as possible. That's not a positive respect, it's a negative respect, but that's fine. Mm-hmm. And so she's trying to stay away. But in a dog pack, a dog is allowed to touch. The alpha dog is allowed to touch any of the other dogs. The head of the pack is allowed to touch you at will, and there's nothing that you should ever say about it. And if you do say something about it, then they put you down, right? So, but it is always the thing that the most dominant animal is allowed to touch you, but you're not allowed to touch them, right? Because if the beta dog comes and touches the alpha dog, then they put him down, you know? And if they can't, that other dog ends up being the dominant one in the long run, you know, and they start to transition out, right? So whenever your dog comes over and gets in your space without an invitation, without it being communicated that this is what I want, you know, this is what I want you to do, and I want you to default to this behavior, then they sometimes don't actually view you with as much respect as you think they do. So if I want to encourage the behavior of a dog coming and sitting at my feet, especially if they're anxious, I'm going to invite them as a sign of whenever I recognize their anxiety, right? So the door thing happens, people come in, I come sit down on my chair. I'm going to, knowing that she's taking comfort from me, I'm going to come and immediately ask her to come over and do that. Because then you told her to come here. You gave her permission to come here. Come enjoy my security. Mm-hmm. But if she comes and sits into you like this and eyeballs the people and everything, then that's her. You're a piece of furniture, right? And we don't want that. We want her to always remain subordinate. I want her to be as dominant as she can be underneath my dominance. That's what I want from my dogs, you know. So we got to get this space's respect. I mean, you sit down in the chair and you have lots and lots of dogs come up and want to snuggle in your lap, and then you reward them for it by petting. Which in general, it's probably not a huge big deal, but it does sometimes make you a dispenser of affection, and that's not. We want you to be respected authority that they come and say, "Would you mind if I come up there and sit with you?" And then you go, "Please." You know, and so as long as the propriety comes in first, we don't care. So we start to work on spaces respect, number one, from our seating positions, and we make sure that if it is something and she comes up and she gets into my space without me asking, I'm like, get out of here. And you use shunning. And dogs use shunning. We talked about it in the evaluation, is that they'll send the dog out until it acts right, and then it can come back in. Right? Do you remember roughly what we talked about? No pun intended. But then if you're seeing them have an anxious situation or something where they need to sit there, just invite them. And just make it a thing where you don't get on me unless I've asked you into my space. And once you get a dog to start respecting your space, they do respect you, period. There is no difference. And it's a weird, seemingly arbitrary thing, but it works. Mm-hmm. And it works consistently, and it works throughout the entire animal. 90 dogs in a yard at a time, and you can see which dogs have respect and which dogs do not. And it has nothing to do with size. A lot of those right there little Shih Tzus and things of that nature is like they get a wide berth, and because they earn it, you know, and they exert their will properly, and they're generally not a problem to anybody unless somebody is offensive. You know, you come over and step on my tail and everything, and I'm going to get after you, right? But if you don't, fine. You know, and sometimes there'll be those dogs that will actually police other dogs, and you know, we see your energy go, and I'm going to run you to the other side of the yard and make you stay out there until you can calm yourself down, and then you can come be part of the rational folks, right? and dogs do it all day long, every day. You'll see 10,000 different interactions, and it's all the same general principles. The other thing that you see in the dog yard, that whenever you have 90 dogs at a time, is they use postural correction, postural communication, which means that I'm going to express to you what it is that I want specifically by using my body language, right? And that's one of the things that I will encourage you to do, and is going to work really great with a dog that's a little bit hesitant, you know, a little bit avoidant. So in terms of like the stick, I use that as the great illustrator. It's not a matter of I need the stick for any reason, but it makes things very clear. Whenever the dog avoids the stick because it respects the stick, I can very accurately, with reach and a lot less effort, give the dogs very specific instructions. So whenever I turn her loose here in a second, I'm going to take that stick back, and I'm going to get her to go sit over there in the hallway instead of right on you, and I'm going to claim you with the stick, right? And that's the way it'll work. Now she might try, and we're going to try not to let her get, you know, damage any of the furniture or anything like that. But what I want to do is I want to get the idea of like claiming things as your own, right? So once we have respect, then we can give that respect to other things, including people, including dogs, including basically anything that is visible that they can see. We can teach them to treat that with the same amount of respect as you treat me. And so you can hand that off. And it works especially while you're monitoring it, and sometimes even whenever you leave. Because sometimes the dog will make a big enough display about this bone, and all the rest of the dogs go, I really want that bone, but I do not want to deal with Martha. You know, I'm not gonna, it's Martha's bone, and I'm not gonna try.
Yeah, we get that with Snow.
Yeah.
We'll give a bone to, or a pig's ear.
Yeah.
And Snow she just waits, and then she'll
She
steal
goes
it.
over and grabs it.
She does?
No.
Snow
does.
Takes
because
it
she doesn't
from.
have any respect for it.
No.
Which is maybe silly, but the bigger dog doesn't always win. And I know, like, I'm very often the big dog and everything. There's some little people that just are dominant as can be.
She never wins.
They get it done. You know, because that's what the dominance is the ability to use your will. It's not about how big and strong or everything.
Oh no, she is determined.
You know, you got a little tiny person with a .38 pistol. They're a dominant creature all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Right? And that is what it is. You know, like there's no sense in making any sort of judgments or anything about it. You know.
That's how it works here.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry. Did I wake you? So obviously, if she can go to sleep, we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
So we're proving the concept. All right. So now we want to talk about that. And so claiming things is like, so what I used to do a lot of times, and I'm not suggesting necessarily that you do this, but the principle of the idea is use something that they want, and very often a food product. You put it down and you can claim it and say that this is mine. And now you will see to what degree you have command over the dog and dominance over the dog by how well you can get them to use their own willpower to decide with their brain to not go after this thing. Because their emotional center...
Bears. I have bears.
Like a figurine or something?
No, it's just a
teddy
toy.
bear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Bears is another one. Yeah, you can use that.
she wants to get your goats,
Uh-huh.
and she will all the time run in the bedroom, jump on the bed, and grab a bear, bring it in.
Mhm.
And I said, that's mine.
Right.
And she takes it over in the corner where she has her toy. She puts it down. Sometimes she'll lay on it. And sometimes she'll walk right over to me and look at it. I mean, with it, just looking at me like, I know this is yours.
Yes, she says, I know this is yours, but so are you. like I said, you think that this bear is yours, but you're mine, so it doesn't matter. That's and I'm being blunt about it. That's it.
Yeah.
Like that's exactly it. It's like it doesn't matter that this is yours because I'm the dominant dog and you're a piece of furniture. And I don't like that type of disrespect for me or for any of my clients or anything like that. So I just illustrated that way. So in those circumstances, she's possessing of something and everything. That's where I do like having an implement of some sort because I can take in and I can get her into the corner and I can wedge that stick between her and the bear. And she really does not want to be a part of the stick.
Right.
And everything. And then she'll abandon the bear, go off there, and then I can very calmly, without having to get any amount of stirred up, without having to have any sort of emotional reaction, can get that thing back and then prove to her that it is actually mine.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
You got it for a second, but in reality it is actually mine, and now that we've found the truth of the matter, you can start to work with that. And that's the less amount of energy you have to do, you have to do that with, the more they will deify you, essentially, right? And because that's the essence of the book that I'm going to write, or actually I think I'm going to make it into a devotional, honestly. And I'm going to start by putting it out on the social medias in little snippets, like little bites. But I think I'm going to make a 31-day devotional about the ministry of dog. And that's the idea, is the word that they use for God in the Greek is just means something that is so much higher than you that you can't achieve it. So we actually are that to the dogs if we choose to be. And that's okay, right? And so hopefully that examining the way that we handle dogs and the things that I learned from the dogs illustrates a better understanding of how I am to God himself. You know what I mean? And so we want to take that authority. We don't do our dogs any justice by getting rid of that authority. We can serve them the best whenever we do put our higher order thinking and our greater understanding of the scenario to continue to instruct them about what is actually true and not true about life. And it doesn't have to be hostile at all. Matter of factly, it's my bear. And I will take it and I will put it back where it belongs. And that's the end of that. And then after that, you need to respect it. Right? And it might turn into a game for a period of time, but that's when the correction stops working, then you up the intensity of it. Mm-hmm. And we have a little bit more of a consistent, where you actually will bait the dog with the bear. It's like, I'm going to set this bear right here where you could get it, and I'm gonna continue to go on about doing my business. There's a great scene in the movie called Gangs of New York. Right? Have you seen the movie?
No.
Okay. Well, it's about brand new New York whenever all the Irish migrants and and Italians and everything came over, and there's a guy who plays the sheriff, right? And he's taking these wealthy people around, and he takes his silver pocket watch, right? And he hangs it on a post right in the middle of right where all of the different gangs come together. And he says that this will be here whenever I get back because this is the control that I have. And then he walks away from it and leaves this valuable pocket watch on the thing as a matter of exerting his authority inside of the situation. I don't think he actually has any, but he does this as a display and everything. And we can do that sort of situation where it's like, no, this is mine, and I want to make sure that you understand that this is mine, and I'm going to sit here and just be around it and neglect it, and it's going to be right in your purview, so that you can continue to reinforce the idea that you don't actually get to interact with it, right? And that's just claiming, And whenever they start to, I'm going to teach you how to do the actual claim, which is getting in between, addressing who it is that I'm talking to, and posturing, posturing towards it, And that can be with just your hand. It can be not with your hand and just with your body. It can scale all the way down to the idea of, I just give a look. There's a range of intensity that you can do. But I'll show you the worst one is this thing right here, and especially with a stick. I get a stick going all the way between my eyes and your eyes. Says, you will connect with me and you will understand me, and this thing's mine. Right?
I got it.
And so the point is that we use that, and then we scale it all the way down to the point where I'm just like, no. And that's all we need to do for the clarity. And if the intensity doesn't need to be up, then we don't do extra by adding more intensity. Right? So I understand that all this stuff is a lot of philosophy. It's a lot of description and talking and things of that nature. So we do want to start solving the problems now that we have some of that stuff. It all makes pretty decent sense to you, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is there any bit of it that you don't agree with, or that you find confusing, or anything that's
I'm
hard to
sure
swallow?
As we go,
Okay.
it'll become clear.
Right.
And when you see the reaction
Mm-hmm.
that you get from her,
Right.
then that helps the positive,
Yeah.
enforcement.
Helps make it real.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so that's part of the reason why I wanted to take her right away and get to the point where we can find calm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be your goal always. It's like with the anxiety, it's always trying to find calm in the end. We always want to end up in calm. If you exit the situation while it's still escalated, then the next time it shows back up, it will escalate right to that level where it left.
Mm-hmm.
We have problems with the dog training or the dog parks and stuff like that. Is a dog will get into a scuffle in the park, and everybody starts hollering and screaming, even raising the energy. And they, get your dog out of here. And then somebody comes over there and just picks the dog up out of the scuffle, everything, and then they run and get it immediately in their car and they leave. And the next time they show up, that dog will go all the way to that same level of intensity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the proper thing to do would be is to get in there and claim that other dog from your dog. As me being authority of this dog, if she starts getting into that with that one, I'm going to go protect that dog and claim it as mine. You don't get to mess with it. It's mine.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
And I will claim it, and then I will require the dog to sit there and be in the presence of this thing and get back to calm before we're allowed to exit. And so if I were in that situation, even if somebody else were in that situation, I were present, that's what I would talk them through, and I would make sure that we understand by the time we're all done with. Because otherwise, if that didn't work, then we couldn't have 90 dogs at a time, But we can always come to a resolution and actually get over the event in the presence of the problem, and what she thinks is the problem, and dispel the myth that this was ever an issue in the first place.
Kind of like a tranquilizer.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying with that. It's like, yeah, no, I do want to be the thing that interrupts and kind of forces a calm.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily quickly. There needs to be a certain amount of quickness in breaking the escalation, but you can take your time calming down. And I'll help you to calm down by giving you affection and everything and petting you, because the petting will calm a dog down in time and everything. But if we don't get them to start calming themselves on their own, then we're rewarding the escalation. Does that make good sense?
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge important principle when we're dealing with the emotions and the anxiety of a dog. Is that we do not when the energy is still going up, we correct that. And then they go, ooh, no, hold on, let me rethink things. And then they try to start calming themselves down, and then I can reward that the rest of the way and help them get to the bottom of it. Because if I just leave her to her own devices to calm down, she'll just wind herself in circles.
So you give her, that's a time when you give her food?
No.
No.
Physical
Okay.
affection.
Okay.
Food adds energy, and food is for actions.
Okay.
The petting is for the state of mind, your energy level, right? And it will tend to calm down. If I pet her with calm energy, she'll get calm. If I all of a sudden start petting her with really, see, she just stirred a little bit, right? So whatever energy I'm petting with, so I can help her calm down by giving her touch in the energy that I want her to achieve. And I can help her get the rest of the way down to a calmer level, right? And so, but we want to do that in the presence of whatever it was that was the problem. We want to teach her, we want to say, you are being the problem. That dog is not the problem, you're the problem. And your anxiety is the problem. And I'm attacking that, and then I'm going to have you come here, and then once you start calming yourself down, I'll help you get the rest of the way. But you got to start yourself. You got to make the decision to calm before I can help you. Is that's hyper important. So let's do some moving, because we want to see the collar work in the way that it works.
Right.
We don't want this to be a myth. We don't want me leaving here and that not be a thing. And so we can start in here, and then we can go outside and see that we can have security of being a little bit closer to free, a little bit more mobile without having to worry about us falling down. How are you doing, sweetie? That's a good girl. Yes, you are. You're a lovely dog. All right, free. So I'm going to start moving, and she's going to resist, and then she's going to give. See? Now, when she comes to the end of it, you see how she's loosening the leash? That's the reason this collar works, is because she doesn't want to be at the end of this leash. Now, when she does this, my job is not to fix it for her. I want her to get through this once, all right? Come on. Come on. There you go. And then she gives, right? So we're going to break that response real quick and get her to realize, real shortly that this idea of running away from the leash and refusing the leash just doesn't produce any fruit. It's just not useful, and that the pulling doesn't fix it, right?
Okay.
Pulling just makes it worse, right? And now this tight of an area, it'll be a little bit difficult for her to start getting some freedom and getting over it. So eventually we do want to get into a little bit more of an open space so that I can move a little bit more. But once I get past this original hesitation with it, she'll get to the point where she just respects the end of the leash. Just in the same way she would respect a person or a space or anything like that, she gets to the point where she's just like, the end of the leash is where I don't want to be. And then we can start moving. Good girl. Just look at that. Like, I let her calm down a little bit, and then we start moving again, and now she starts moving with me. But, had you guys started with that, good girl, had you guys started with that, then that would have probably stirred you up and made you feel a certain way about it, and then you would have wanted to give her some leash back so that it stopped freaking her out. Do you agree? Right?
Yeah.
That's what we can't have, because that's a lie. The lie is that you freaking out is what makes the pressure stop.
Okay.
And so I had to hold firm in there, and it is uncomfortable, and I don't disagree, and I don't really like it. I would much rather a dog just give to it right from the beginning, and then we don't have to go through that. But if it does, I gotta be the kind of cold person that I need to be in order to be firm for her. And I also did not get stirred up about it. I didn't make a fuss about it. I just held on and held still and let her find out that the collar works. You know, this is like with a horse, when like when you're training horses and everything, they have this old process where they call it the post of knowledge, and they give you about this much. They give you about this much of the lead rope, and they tie it to a post, and the horse will fight against it because they're flight creatures. They just want to run away, and they're in a harness, a halter that And they'll pull and pull and pull and pull, and eventually they get to the point where they just sink their head and they just stand there calmly, right?
Mm-hmm.
That takes so much longer because it's not like a prong collar. Prong collar gives a lot more information, a lot quicker, gets them over it, and then we can just move on, right?
Okay.
And then this behavior stops because you saw the last time she started walking with me, she just actually walked with me, and that was in 40 seconds. We didn't have a big, long training process that takes you forever to get through, that you have to be perfect through the whole time in order to get the dog to make the decision to walk with you. It's like you just create a very obvious positive, negative answer. It's positive when you walk with me, it's negative when you don't, and everything. And then I just keep moving because that's what a leader does. Leaders don't lead because of position, leaders lead because of motion, right? If I decide to go this way and you decide to go that way and everything, nobody's leading anybody. But if I decide to go this way and you're like, oh, wait a minute, hold on, I don't want to be alone, and you follow me, I'm the leader. You know, if I, as a business person, say this is the direction we're taking this business, and everybody gets on board with it, that makes me the leader. It doesn't have anything to do with the position. Very often, you can get into situations where you lead from a place of no position and you just start acting with character and integrity and all of these different things, and people start following along because they don't want to be the odd person out.
Right.
Right? And so we want to think about that in terms of leadership, that leading is about motion. I decide where we're going. We're going because I'm going. We're not going because I'm not going. Whatever it is, I've made a decision. I'm going to act the way that I'm going to act, and you have the choice whether to follow me or not. So does the dog. There just happens to be a consequence attached to the choice to get them to come to the conclusion a lot faster. And you go through this method, and you get to a dog to walk with you off leash way quicker than any other method out there. But that's because we find out and we break through all the emotional stuff first and get her to stop fighting her own, giving way to our own emotions, and just start going with the flow and submitting to the process of walking. And then we get over it. We don't spend weeks and weeks in a training program. It costs thousands of dollars. You just have a conversation, you get the right tools, and I show you how to do it. And then you just keep doing it. And then you get results pretty quickly. But people get weirded out about the way the collar looks and everything like that, and they don't want to try at all. They submit to their fear or their sympathy or something like that, and they end up causing the dog to live in anxiety for years and years and years and years, which is pain.
My goodness.
But see the difference in her demeanor? She's back over with Dad, but she's not. And that's because she found out that I'm not a problem. I mean, like, I'm a little bit of a problem, but I'm not I'm not anything that needs to be like feared for safety.
Right.
And she can move with me and all of these different things, and that de-escalates so quickly. One or two events and these things go away almost entirely. And that's where whenever I do take a dog for 2 weeks and everything, the dogs doesn't resemble the other dogs because I take all of their cripplings away with good, steady, strong, unreactive leadership. I just walk. And I don't walk according to whether the dog's following me or not. I just walk.
Just walk.
Yeah. And that's where you going fast or slow doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is we move when I say move. We don't move when I say don't move. If I want to go left, we go left. If I want to go right, we go right and everything. But I have to get that mentality of I'm making the decision and the dog is trying to figure out how to fit into my world. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is a mentality that a lot of people don't come to very naturally. They're like, oh, I want to make sure you're all right. And there has to be a little bit of, I know you're going to be all right. It could get bad, but it's not going to get so bad that you can't handle it. And I believe in you. You can handle this, and let's get to the other side of it, right? And so that's kind of the spiritual conversation that gets us through with dogs, and we actually get to where we need to go. And when we have the right tools, it doesn't have to just tear up their trachea in the process. You know, we can just get there, right? And then as time goes on, it gets to the point where you need less and less and less tool, less and less and less authority, because the dog just starts following you well.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I want to teach you guys walking specifically. We've talked about the other stuff that's kind of involves reacting to whatever the dog does. This is going to be more of a matter of proactive, as a matter of making sure that you guys have the ability to get her out and take her to situations and make sure that she can learn how to interact with things. And it also helps us to start establishing the verbal cues that will be super helpful. Because if I have nope and it stops my dog from whatever they're doing and causes them to check back in with me, I have already solved like 80% of the problems that a dog can have. If they can do that reliably, very few things that I can't observe and monitor to the point where I start to teach them, hey, don't interact with that. I don't like that energy, whatever it happens to be. But we start teaching that with the moving. And that also helps to establish our position as authority, because if we're the one who decides all of the different movings and how that goes, then the dog knows we're the leader. And they don't have the ability to think otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You just overamped, aren't you, sweetheart? It's like, this is more than my little brain can handle right now. But that's good, because we're getting past all the power of the anxiety, and now she's starting to get a little bit tired with it, and she'll start to give in a little quicker. And that's where a lot of people hate the fact that I have these long first lessons. And they're like, oh, that's just too much for a dog and everything. It's like, no. It's a little closer to the idea of breaking a horse whenever you're doing one of these things, is because you get past those unbelievable barriers to the point to where we can actually come together a little bit. And then we leave it in a place whenever it's nice and calm and relaxed.
Tough love, huh?
Right, it is absolutely tough love. But we have the tough love up front so that we can have the unbelievable, graceful, super generous love in the long run. But you don't do them out of order. If you do them out of order, we end up having problems. Mm-hmm. There's almost nothing in the Bible that says you can't have riches, you can't have pleasure, you can't have all of these different things, but you have the discipline first. You earn them. You do the things that are necessary first. You set the structure up. You make sure that it's not going to be harmful for you, and then whatever, then have fun, right? And then that's a perfectly reasonable thing, and it produces fruit reliably, consistently all the time. Like, I want to have a whole bunch of business, but if I don't get my business practices in order properly, me having a whole bunch of business will ruin me. And me all of a sudden getting all sorts of money, me winning the lottery, horrible deal unless I've got discipline.
Discipline.
Let's go ahead and take it outside, and just so that we can get a little bit of motion. I don't want this all to be just talk. I want you guys to be able to see